Metroidvania is a genre that I've never fully sunk my feet into. Sure, I've played a couple 2D Metroids, as well as the remaster of Prime, but I haven't played any further than that. It's not that I dislike the genre, but the occasion of looping hallways and getting lost, as well as the difficulty in some games, doesn't really appeal to me. But at PAX East last year, at the suggestion of a friend, I queued up for a game called GIGASWORD. After playing a little bit of the demo on the show floor, and then a little more at home on my PC, I put this game firmly in my Steam wishlist. With a year having passed and the game finally releasing, I decided to take advantage of the Steam summer sale to finally pick this game up and break out of my comfort zone. In GIGASWORD, you play as a human beggar named Ezra. Ezra's companions with a nocturne named Omari, who lives in a tall tower called the Nestrium. Omari, along with the rest of his people, protect the human denizens of the kingdom of Thoenhart from a god crystal called Gnosis. After years of harboring hatred against the Nocturne, a human army, led by General Vierst, launches an attack and takes over the Nestrium, believing that Gnosis can end human hunger and suffering. However, it only corrupts the humans and turns them into hellish creatures. Now, it's up to Ezra to take up Omari's sword and restore order to the human world. The combat in GIGASWORD is basic, yet serviceable all the same. Your main attack on the ground is a 3-swing combo. In the air, you have an attack that will slash forward at enemies before thrusting down into a ground pound. And on the defensive, you have a dodge roll that can pull you away from enemies, as well as allow you to roll through projectiles. Ironically, the points that I really thought the game got interesting was when I was separated from my sword, as you're not always going to be glued to this big hunk of steel. There's a give and take that comes with ditching your sword. Sometimes a puzzle will call for you to weigh down a button, and your sword makes for the perfect counterweight to keep that button pressed. While you open yourself up to damage, you can jump higher and climb up to those ledges that are normally just out of reach with your sword. And without your massive sword weighing you down, you'll be able to swim properly in water. As you slay enemies, you'll collect ore to spend in the save rooms to upgrade your abilities. At first, you'll be able to upgrade your physical attacks, effectively turning them into ranged attacks. Your upgraded ground pound in particular can be extremely effective. When fully upgraded, your ground pound will send out waves on either side of you to attack enemies at range. If timed just right, you'll be able to get 2 for 1 on hits on enemies, as you'll hit them with your sword followed by the wave attack. Physical abilities aside, you'll also gain the ability to use magic. You'll get the ability to heal outside of save rooms, which becomes an absolute necessity with each stage. You can summon lightning strikes to do damage to enemies, though I never really found it too effective in combat. But what I found most effective was the ability to shoot fireballs. Especially when you fully upgrade this ability and your fireball shot becomes a spread shot that can take out multiple enemies in one go. There's also the upgrades you gain as you progress the story and open up more of the Nestrium. These include a launch pad that will send you flying higher up into the Nestrium to reach new areas, a grappling hook to help you traverse between platforms, and the Astral Owl Band, which emits the spirit form of an owl to fly through a room and hit lanterns that are far out of your reach. With this being a Metroidvania, you're also going to have to solve a few puzzles along the way. And GIGASWORD does a tremendous job in offering variety in the puzzle department. Like this one puzzle here in the flooded garden. I originally thought I was getting ahead of myself as I progressed through a few rooms without my sword. However, it all came back around as I ended up in the first room and regained my sword to keep going. A couple puzzles in the buried depths have darkened areas lit only by torchlight and fireflies that require careful movement to complete. These sections provided a unique change of pace, as well as some genuine jump scares that kept me on my toes as I inched forward. The Astral Owl Ring puzzles provided a fun yet tense race against the clock and were some of my favorite puzzles. With tight timing, you have to fly through a series of rings a la Superman 64, In later challenges, you're forced to change the course layout and plan out your route in order to make it through the rings in time. With all these positives said, it's time to talk about the one area of gameplay that I felt fell very short: the platforming. Moving from level to level, I found that platforming could have been tuned up to be a little bit better. Ezra's jump really lacks in forward momentum, so much so that I felt like I needed to time my jump on the last possible pixel in order to clear jumps. I found that your aerial attack gives you a little extra pop in the air, so I started to use that over gaps to give myself a little extra cushion to land. In the segments where I had to abandon my sword and wall jump between ledges, I would occasionally drop off the ledge instead of jumping and have to start all over. And then there were the segments where you have to jump between ladders. Because the jump lacks forward push, I was just making it in time to grab onto the ladder when I wasn't missing it entirely. But by far the worst platforming challenge was later in the game. I had to leave my sword behind and loop back around for it to complete a puzzle. Sure, I've done this before, but the route I had to take featured crushing pillars that I had to time my movement between, as well as disappearing platforms that have the most annoying timing in the game. All the while, there's multiple enemies trying to attack me. This was the first time in my playthrough where I said to myself, man, I'm really not having any fun playing this game. As you traverse the Nestarium, you'll find that the different levels of the game have their own different atmosphere and feel. Most of the levels of the game are accessed through the game's main hub, the monastery. The name is very fitting, as the halls feel very warm and lived in, despite having to jump between platforms. Deeper into the Nestarium, you'll find the Buried Depths, a creepy old dungeon created by human hands. The sudden tonal shift to horror really makes this level stand out, and in my opinion carries the best aesthetic in the game. You'll find yourself traversing across dim rooms with creepy new enemies on the prowl, really taking from the Castlevania side of Metroidvania. Further up the tower is the Lunarium, a mechanical stronghold. Most everywhere you'll go, you'll find cogs and gears in the background, as well as moving platforms to jump along, or crushing pistons to avoid. And at the peak of the tower is the High Wall, absolute hell itself. The eye of the storm that you've spent the game climbing up to. Exteriors show blood-red skies with non-stop storms, and lightning that will strike your sword if you're exposed to the elements for too long. Inside lays some of the strongest enemies of the game, all looking to stop you from reaching Gnosis. Speaking of which, you'll encounter a variety of enemy types in GIGASWORD. You'll find that the devilish creatures that would have been human soldiers have taken the form of scorpions, turrets, and skeleton swordsmen. This is where I really have to give the game some props in the design department, as there's some great looking enemies through this game, like these electric eels that patrolled the waters of the flooded gardens. They honestly spooked the hell out of me when I came into the room for the first time to see them swimming around. As did this necromanced T-Rex creature in the Buried Depths that feels like something right out of Resident Evil. This monstrosity pukes up trails of bile and tries to charge you head on, when it's not trying to chomp a bite out of you. Now, when grouped together in a room, these enemies can be a struggle to take on. By the time you reach the High Wall, you'll find large rooms filled to the brim with some of the game's toughest enemies, and you'll have to fight through this gauntlet just to get to the next room. It was in this point of the game that I chose to dodge roll and damage boost my way through rooms, as I just wanted to make it out of there. It was also later in the game when I chose to range out some of these enemies. With things only getting harder, I fell back on my ground pound and fireballs to avoid taking unnecessary damage. But what good is great level, enemy, and puzzle design if they don't lead to boss fights that are just as good? Well, fortunately, the bosses of GIGASWORD live up to the levels they occupy. Olastasia, the last remaining Nocturne in the Nestarium, acts as a solid challenge of melee combat. Engel, the Silver Paladin, serves as a test of the Astral Owl. You'll have to withstand his attacks and break through his armored form in order to break out his true form to damage with the Astral Owl. What I like most about battling his true form is that it becomes much more of a bullet hell. You have to avoid waves of heavy fire and fire back with your owl form in order to damage and kill this boss. The Horrid Amalgam made for the most interesting fight in this game. On first sight, this thing creeped the hell out of me, and having to fight this creature put me even more on edge because I've been separated from my sword for this entire level. The only way I was able to do any damage to the Horrid Amalgam was to time barrels to explode as he chased me through tunnels. Then of course there's General Vierst. As the big bad villain of the story, he gets two phases. His human form, of course, was easy to dispatch as it was a battle of melee. The second form, however, was an absolute monstrosity. His ability to ground pound, fire projectiles, and summon enemies at will really kept me on my toes, especially where I had to keep track of where his heart was in order to do any damage. With these examples said, I felt that GIGASWORD is bookended by two of the weakest battles in my opinion. First you have Sloan, the Executioner, who's very basic and I would even say forgettable. I will say though that he is pretty fitting for being your first boss encounter in the game, and warming you up for what's to come. Then you have the game's final boss, the Pole. Symbolizing the corrupting power of Gnosis, the Pole felt like such an anticlimactic battle after such a big fight with General Vierst. The Pole will turn into evil versions of Ezra, Omari, and of course another fight with Vierst's human form. Despite taking a death here after still being fairly damaged from the last battle, I felt like this was too easy for a final boss. Now there are a few more boss fights that I hadn't mentioned in this section, and that's really because I thought these fights were just alright, and compared to the examples I provided, I didn't really feel like they were worth mentioning. I found that the story of GIGASWORD was just decent. It's about what you'd expect out of a story where a commoner grows into the role of hero. My main issue was that the game has the tendency to drop a lot of text on you at once. Despite featuring some beautiful pixel art, the intro is about 7 minutes of text. That is 7 whole minutes from pressing New Game before you're even allowed to take control of Ezra. But to be fair, these text segments are broken up by long stretches of gameplay. Another con I have to give this story is that we really don't get much out of General Vierst and his men. In the beginning, you see Ezra get busted for trying to steal food from the military rations, and in the final confrontation with General Vierst, you get a little more out of him, but there's nothing really in between to set up the bad guys. The real core of the story lies within the relationship between Ezra and Omari. Despite dying at the start of the game, Omari comes to Ezra like a force ghost through the power of the Nestarium. He'll appear to you at points to urge you on to keep fighting your way up the tower in order to save the day. Even if their interactions can get wordy and take away from gameplay, I still really enjoyed watching the relationship between Ezra and Omari bloom. By the end of the game, you can really tell that Ezra's taken on some of the wisdom that Omari's dropped on him over the years, and has grown far from the street beggar that we meet at the beginning of the game. And seeing the pride that Omari has in his friend at the game's finale really makes this ending feel even more bittersweet. While I'm wrapping up, I just want to point out how great of a soundtrack this game has. The best way I can really describe it is that it's a very textured soundtrack. Sure, it's chip-tuned to fit the aesthetic of the game, but game creator Jack Breen really took advantage of his tools to come up with a soundtrack that captures some deep lows and some intense highs. On the low end, you can hear the mysticism and suspense from games like Metroid or Castlevania 3, and on the more intense end of music you'd hear in combat, I actually thought more of games like Mega Man, Batman on NES, and even Double Dragon. And to give you an idea of what I mean, I've actually been using the music throughout this entire video. So overall, GIGASWORD is a game that I'm very glad to have seen through to the end. There were a small handful of moments in playing the game where I kept hitting a frustrating wall and honestly considered dropping the game altogether. However, through the frustration, I felt equally determined to pick myself up and push onward. And mixed in with those moments of frustration, there were plenty moments of engagement an eventual triumph in overcoming the challenge. I would routinely use the phrase, "I'm glad I never have to do that again," after beating particularly hard parts of the game, not out of frustration, but out of pure glee that I finally overcame a challenge. Watching the credits roll, I didn't have that moment of conversion, where I felt the need to go and grab all the MetroidVanias I can get my hands on, but I did feel a sense of accomplishment in tackling a game I would have never considered looking at if I didn't get the nudge to try it out at PAX. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed what you saw, please feel free to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And as always, I'll see you guys on the next one.